If you're over 50 and you've been waking up exhausted, not tired like you used to get tired in your 30s, but this deep cellular exhaustion that no amount of sleep seems to fix, I want you to stay with me for the next few minutes because what I'm about to share with you is something I've spent over 40 years as a doctor trying to understand, and something my grandmother Rachel understood instinctively before modern science had a single word for it. Every morning, before my grandmother did anything else, before she put her feet on the floor, before she stood up, before she touched a single thing in that apartment in Brooklyn, she did something, something quiet, something that took less than 60 seconds. And I watched her do it for years without understanding what I was actually witnessing. I'm Dr. Sarah Levine, and I've spent 4 decades practicing preventive medicine and longevity research, combining what I learned at Hebrew University's Hadassah Medical School with what my grandmother Rachel, who lived to 98 years old without a single prescription medication until she was in her 90s, recorded in her notebooks over a lifetime of careful, devoted observation. What I teach comes from those two sources together: the ancient wisdom of Jewish tradition and the modern science that is now finally catching up to what that tradition always knew. Today, I want to teach you something that is almost certainly happening in your bedroom every single morning, and it is quietly working against your hormones, your immune system, your inflammation levels, and the quality of every hour that follows. This is part of the 7 Jewish laws of longevity, a system I've spent decades documenting. And what I'm sharing today is one of the most overlooked of all 7. Toward the end of this teaching, I'm going to share something my grandmother only ever revealed to women she felt she could truly trust, a detail about this morning practice that completely changes how it works in the body. So please stay with me. My grandmother Rachel was born in Łódź, Poland in 1921. She came to Brooklyn as a young woman carrying very little except her memory and her faith, and she lived the rest of her long, remarkable life, organizing each day around rhythms and practices she had learned from her own mother and her mother before her. Rachel never framed these things as health advice. She didn't speak in terms of hormones or inflammation or cortisol. She spoke in terms of obligation, of gratitude, of the right ordering of things. She believed in, and she said this to me many times, that how you enter the morning determines what the morning is permitted to give you. That phrase stayed with me for decades before I finally understood it the way she meant it. When I was 45 years old, I hit a wall. I was a practicing physician. I was eating reasonably well. I was exercising, and I was completely depleted. I woke up tired every single morning. I had brain fog that made it difficult to think clearly by early afternoon. My hormones were a mess. My inflammatory markers were elevated in ways that didn't make sense given my lifestyle. I went through the standard medical workup. Everything came back within normal range. My colleagues told me what I had told so many of my own patients. This is just perimenopause. This is just the transition. Give it time. I didn't give it time. I went to the notebooks. My grandmother Rachel kept detailed notebooks written in a mix of Yiddish and Polish that recorded everything she observed about health, about the body, about what helped and what didn't over the course of a very long life. They were not organized the way a medical text would be organized. They were organized the way a garden is organized, by season, by rhythm, by what comes before what. And the first thing I found when I started reading them seriously was this: she had written extensively about the morning, about what happens in the body if the morning is entered correctly and what is lost when it isn't. I applied what I found there. Within 3 months, everything began to shift. That was the beginning of what I now call the 7 Jewish laws of longevity, a system I have spent the subsequent decades validating, refining, and teaching to women who were exactly where I had been. Before we go further, I want you to type something in the comments right now. Type, "I begin with gratitude." Just those 4 words. Because what I'm teaching you today starts there, and I want you to plant that intention before we continue. Let me tell you what is actually happening in your body in the first minutes after you wake up. This is not theory. This is one of the most well-documented phenomena in modern sleep and endocrine research, and almost no one talks about it in terms that make it actionable for women over 50. In the 20 to 30 minutes following the moment you wake up, your body produces a sharp, deliberate surge of cortisol. Researchers call this the cortisol awakening response, and it is not a stress reaction. It is actually a calibration mechanism. Your body is using this cortisol surge to set the tone for your entire immune system, your inflammatory response, your blood sugar regulation, and your energy metabolism for the hours ahead. Think of it as the body running a morning diagnostic. The question is, what information is the diagnostic reading? Studies published in the journal Psychoneuroendocrinology have found that the cortisol awakening response is significantly shaped by the psychological state of the person in the moment they wake. Women who wake into a state of rumination, immediately thinking about what they have to do, what they failed to do yesterday, what worries them, show a dysregulated CAR pattern associated with higher chronic inflammation, poorer immune function, and worse metabolic outcomes across the day. Women who wake into a state of positive anticipation and gratitude show a healthier CAR profile. This has now been replicated in multiple studies and is considered a foundational finding in psychoneuroimmunology. Here's what most women over 50 are doing instead. The alarm goes off, or they wake naturally, and within 15 seconds they are already mentally constructing their day, reviewing their worries or reaching for their phone. They sit up, they stand up, they begin moving, they make their bed, they go to the bathroom, they start the coffee. And their nervous system has registered all of this as the beginning of a threat response before they've taken their first conscious breath. The cortisol awakening response, which should be calibrating toward resilience, is instead calibrating toward vigilance. And that pattern, repeated every single morning for years, is one of the mechanisms behind the chronic low-grade inflammation that researchers at the National Institute on Aging now identify as one of the primary biological drivers of accelerated aging in women after menopause. According to the CDC, over 60% of American women between the ages of 50 and 70 report persistent fatigue that is not explained by diagnosed illness. 60%. That number is not a coincidence. It is, in part, the accumulated consequence of a morning that is being entered incorrectly day after day for decades. The Jewish tradition knew this. Not in the language of cortisol and psychoneuroimmunology, but with a precision that takes my breath away when I set the two traditions beside each other. For over 3,000 years, the first act of every Jewish morning has been a prayer called the Modeh Ani. It is recited before anything else, before standing, before speaking to another person, before touching water or food or any object in the world. The text is brief. I offer thanks to you, living and eternal King, for you have mercifully restored my soul within me. Your faithfulness is great. 14 words in Hebrew. Less than 30 seconds to say. And observant Jews have been saying it upon waking, before their feet touch the floor, for millennia. My grandmother Rachel said the Modeh Ani every single morning of her life. She said it quietly, lying still before she moved. And what she was doing neurologically is exactly what modern researchers now understand the body requires in those first moments of waking: a deliberate interruption of threat-based activation and a redirection of the nervous system towards safety, gratitude, and presence. This is one of the 7 Jewish laws of longevity that I've spent 40 years documenting. Law 7 in the system is what I call the law of Simcha, the law of joy as practice rather than feeling. Most people think of joy as something that happens to them when circumstances are favorable. The Jewish tradition understood joy as something you do, something you practice, something you generate deliberately through specific acts performed at specific times. The Modeh Ani is the first act of Simcha in the Jewish day. Before you see the circumstances of your life, before you assess whether things are good or difficult, you declare your gratitude for the restoration of consciousness. You tell your nervous system, I am safe, I have returned, this is enough. Maimonides, the great medieval Jewish physician and rabbi who served as personal doctor to Sultan Saladin in the 12th century and wrote what is arguably the most sophisticated health manual of the ancient world, wrote in his Mishneh Torah that the disposition of the mind upon waking is not separate from the health of the body. He wrote that a person who wakes in a state of agitation has disrupted the balance of vital forces before the day has begun, and that this disruption requires deliberate correction through gratitude and calm attention. 800 years before the discovery of cortisol, Maimonides described the cortisol awakening response and told us exactly what to do about it. Now, the title of this teaching promises something about your bed. And I want to tell you about that now because it is both simpler and stranger than you might expect. And it connects directly to everything I've just described. Here is what I want you to never do again without thinking. Stand up the moment you wake, strip back your covers, and immediately make your bed tight and sealed before you leave the room. There are 2 reasons for this, and they operate at 2 very different levels. The first is practical and has been confirmed by research from Kingston University in the United Kingdom. Your mattress and bedding host millions of house dust mites, organisms that thrive in warmth and moisture. When you make your bed immediately after rising, you seal that warmth and moisture in. When you leave your bed unmade, airing out for 20 to 30 minutes while you go through your morning practice, the exposure to air and light dramatically reduces the moisture the mites need to survive. It is a small thing, but small things practiced daily across decades are exactly how my grandmother Rachel maintained a body that required no medication until the age of 90. The second reason is what I actually want to teach you today, and it is this. Your bed should not be the first thing you do. There is something that must come first. When you wake, before your feet touch the floor, lie still for 30 to 60 seconds. This is not optional in the system my grandmother taught. This is the hinge on which the whole morning turns. In that stillness, say, aloud if you can, silently if you must, words of gratitude. They do not need to be the Modeh Ani in Hebrew. They need to be sincere, and they need to be spoken before you begin to plan, before you begin to worry, before you reach for your phone. The words are less important than the neurological act of generating genuine thankfulness before your threat assessment system has had the chance to activate. Researchers at the University of California, Berkeley's Greater Good Science Center, have published extensive findings on what they call the gratitude effect, the measurable reduction in inflammatory cytokines, the improvement in heart rate variability, the reduction in perceived stress. That occurs when gratitude is practiced as a first-of-day intervention. These are not soft psychological findings. These are biomarker findings. The body changes at a measurable biological level when the morning begins with genuine, verbalized gratitude. My grandmother did not leave her bed until she had done this, and she did not make her bed until she had done one more thing. She washed her hands in the ritual Jewish manner 3 times alternating, which the tradition calls netilat yadayim. the lifting of the hands. The Talmud in Tractate Bereshot describes this morning hand washing as the removal of the spiritual impurity of sleep, a concept I find more interesting the older I get, because what we now know about the overnight accumulation of bacteria and inflammatory compounds on the hands and skin suggests that the ancient rabbis were observing something real, even if they were describing it in the language available to them. After the stillness, after the gratitude, after the washing, then you stand, then you move through your morning, then and only then you make your bed. The sequence matters. This is something my grandmother Rachel understood, and something I have seen confirmed over and over in my practice. It is not enough to do the right things in the wrong order. The body is not a list of ingredients. It is a recipe. The order of things changes the outcome. I have to tell you something about a period in my own life when I abandoned this practice. It was during a particularly difficult stretch about 12 years ago, a time of personal loss and professional pressure that I don't need to detail here. I stopped doing the morning stillness. I stopped saying the gratitude before my feet hit the floor. I told myself I didn't have time, that it was a luxury, that the urgent things needed to come first. Within 6 weeks, I was waking with my heart already racing. My inflammation markers crept up. I was short-tempered by midday and crashing by 3 in the afternoon. It took me an embarrassingly long time to connect what I was experiencing to what I had stopped doing. When I returned to the practice, just 60 seconds of stillness, just the gratitude, just the hand washing before anything else. The shift was noticeable within 10 days. Not dramatic, not magical, steady, like a tide coming back in. We are living through a moment when this practice is more necessary than perhaps any other time in recent memory. We are carrying, as women over 50, an extraordinary burden of ambient stress. Global news cycles designed to keep our nervous systems activated, social media that rewards alarm and urgency, a medical system that often treats our symptoms without addressing the patterns underneath. Our cortisol awakening response is being hijacked every morning before we've even registered that we're awake. The 7 laws of longevity that I've spent 40 years documenting are not luxuries for a simpler time. They are emergency medicine for this time. My grandmother used to say that these practices don't work like pills. One at a time, on demand. They work like a garden. All 7 laws together, tended with consistency. What I've taught you today, the morning stillness, the Modi Ani, the gratitude before the cortisol knows what it's calibrating toward, the sequence of things before the bed is made. This is Law 7, the law of Simcha. Joy not as an emotion you wait for, but as an act you perform. And this law becomes far more powerful when practiced alongside the others in the system. Each law is a thread. Woven together, they hold. Now let me give you the exact practice. Here is what I want you to do tomorrow morning and every morning after. The moment you become aware that you are awake, before you open your eyes fully, before you check the time, before you speak, place one hand on your chest. Feel your heartbeat. Take 3 slow breaths, and then say, aloud or silently, "Thank you, I have returned." Those words, or any words that carry the same genuine meaning for you. What matters is that you are generating gratitude before your threat system has had the chance to set the morning's tone. And this is important, stay still for 30 seconds after that. Do not immediately throw back the covers. Do not swing your legs out. Breathe. Let your nervous system register the state you've just created. This is the moment the cortisol awakening response is reading you. Give it something worth reading. Then sit up slowly. Go to the sink and wash your hands thoroughly, alternating 3 times each hand. Let this be intentional rather than automatic. Feel the water. Then go about your morning. Come back to your bed later, 5, 10, 15 minutes from now, and make it then. In those minutes of airing, something is happening at the biological level that benefits your sleep environment. And in the rhythm of returning to make the bed rather than making it first, you are practicing the Jewish principle of sequence. First the sacred, then the practical, first the inner, then the outer. In 24 hours, you may notice nothing. In 7 days, many of the women I've worked with begin to notice that they are reaching for coffee a little later, that the first hour of the day feels slightly less like clawing up a hill. In 3 to 4 weeks, the pattern deepens. The nervous system learns the new morning. The cortisol awakening response recalibrates. The garden begins to grow. But here is what I want to leave you with, and this is the part my grandmother revealed only to women she trusted. She told me once that the Modeh Ani was not a religious obligation, the way keeping Shabbat or keeping kosher was a religious obligation. She said it was different. She said it was a conversation. She said that every morning you thank the body for returning, for doing the extraordinary, unremarkable work of being alive through the night. The body hears you. Not metaphorically, literally. She was describing something I now understand through the science of psychoneuroimmunology, that the body's immune and hormonal systems are genuinely responsive to the states of mind we generate, and that a body that is thanked repeatedly over years behaves differently than one that is never addressed at all. In our tradition, the body is not yours to neglect. It is a gift given to you in trust, Tselem Elohim, made in the image of the divine. To care for it is a sacred act, and to care for it correctly, we must begin at the beginning, before the bed is made, before the day begins, before the world asks anything of you. To summarize what I've taught you today, the first 60 seconds after waking are not neutral. They are the biological moment when your body sets the hormonal and immune tone for the entire day. Jewish tradition has understood this for over 3,000 years through the practice of the Modeh Ani. Modern science calls it the cortisol awakening response and has confirmed what my grandmother Rachel knew without a single clinical trial. The practice is simple. Lie still upon waking. Generate genuine gratitude before your feet leave the bed. Wash your hands with intention and leave your bed to air before you return to make it. The sequence is the medicine. In my next teaching, I'll be sharing another of the 7 Jewish laws of longevity, and this one is the law that most women over 50 have been practicing in exactly the wrong direction without realizing it. It concerns something you do every evening, something you consider completely ordinary, and the way you're doing it is quietly undermining everything else you do for your health. I'll share it soon, and when I do, I think you'll understand for the first time why your evenings have been working against your mornings. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. If this teaching reached you today, I ask you to share it with a daughter, a sister, a friend, any woman over 50 who is waking up exhausted and being told by her doctor that nothing is wrong. Share it because what I've described today is not complicated and it is not expensive and it does not require a prescription. It requires 60 seconds and an intention. And in the tradition I was raised in, knowledge like this carries an obligation. Once you have it, you must pass it on. Until next time, l'chaim, to life.